Welcome to the Resilient Pastor podcast. As a reminder, this podcast is not the only way that you can engage with this content. There's a much larger Resilient Pastor initiative from Barna that includes in-person events and webinars. It's really aimed at encouraging and equipping pastors and church leaders to love well and lead faithfully in a rapidly changing world. And you can always learn more about those at barna.com/resilientpastor. Well, I'm here with my buddies, Rich and Glenn, and it's officially Christmas season, although really it's been Christmas season since October. But how are you guys preparing for Advent?
Sharon, I saw you've been watching Hallmark movies since October. It's been Christmas in your house for a long time.
You know, I actually did this to myself. I somehow got my dad really into Hallmark Christmas movies. And now he is the one who's like holding me accountable to like watch every single one. Like I forgot. I fell down on the job this year. It was October and I wasn't watching. And he was like, "What are you doing?" So I blame myself.
That's amazing.
I created monster.
Wow. Yeah, I'm preparing through, I think, two words, scripture and shopping. And so
the two S's.
The two S's. So we're in a series through the book of Isaiah for the Advent season. So just immersing myself in that and trying my best not to be in a line at some store on December 23rd. So pray for me, everyone. Pray for me.
Very good. Well done. I'm reading through, Holly and I are actually reading through a new book / devotional by Dr. Amy Orr Ewing. She's a British author and speaker, and it's really good. It's called Mary's Voice, and it's excellent. We have Christmas music going in the house. I mean, we probably had that going since November. And a little drop for our people who may not know. There's a Barna's doing an Advent for Pastors thing. So, pastors, if you're needing something just for you, got a little video series for you. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Barna, one other reminder for everyone listening about a great way to go deeper with the Resilient Pastor initiative is we have a 12-week cohort that is going to be meeting every other week for teaching on Zoom. The faculty for this cohort is including me, Rich, and Glenn, along with Ken Shigematsu and Joe Saxton. And that starts January 31st of 2024. So mark your calendars. And then it ends with an in-person gathering in April. And so if you are interested, get the early bird special now through December 31st. And again, you can learn more and register early at barna.com/cohort. Now, for today's conversation, Glenn, you got to sit down with Jeanne Stevens. Can you share with us a little bit about Jeanne and what you talked about in your conversation with her?
I love Jeanne. Jeanne was like my mini tour buddy when we did the Resilient Pastor Roundtables, which is, I say tour. We only did 3 cities, but Jeanne was with me in each of the cities. So I got to hear her a couple times in each city. And I just told her, even the last one that we did, which was here at Rock Harbor, she's so good at communicating this message about presence. Her new book is Where Are You Now? Or What's Here Now, excuse me. And it's such a powerful reminder about taking an inventory of our emotions, our thoughts, and our bodies to keep us in the present. But Jeanne and her husband, Jarrett, planted Soul City Church in Chicago's West Loop neighborhood back in 2010. And Soul City is actually one of the fastest growing urban churches in the U.S. She's had the opportunity to lead and speak into the lives of thousands of people around the country, around the world. She's a speaker, leader, writer. She's the author of multiple devotionals and books, including, this latest one, What's Here Now? How to Stop Rehashing the Past and Rehearsing the Future and to Start Receiving the Present. So we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that I thought might be interesting for us to unpack is, what does it look like for our church to be mobilized in engagement? A lot of churches call this engagement, both at a local level and at a global level. And so I'd love to hear from each of you. Rich, we'll start with you. What does engagement at a local level look like for New Life Fellowship?
Yeah, when I think about the ways that we've engaged in terms of service, in terms of local engagement. There are three kind of, if we could look at concentric circles, I think about, first of all, what does that look like within our local church? What does that look like within the neighborhood? And then what does that look like outside of the neighborhood more globally? And so we have, in 2013, when I became the lead pastor, one of the first things I did was to change a bit of our membership process, and not just our membership process, but to intentionally symbolize the importance of service. And so new members received a towel as a way of saying, to be part of this community means that we are all going to pick up a towel and serve one another and serve our neighbors. And so that's kind of within our theological priorities and formational planning and such. That's really a big part of it. In terms of the community, when I came to New Life 15 years ago, we had already been deeply involved in the life of our church through our Community Development Corporation. And so it's one of the things I'm most proud of. Prior to the pandemic, in the last couple of years, we've had to rethink what community development looks like because of the nature of the pandemic and how it upset a lot of different things. But prior to the pandemic, our Community Development Corporation had about 10 programs serving the poor. We have a health center, which at that time we were seeing 2,000 patients a year, food and clothing pantry, after school services, training teenagers to be community organizers. And so this emerged out of the individual passions of New Life congregants who wanted to actually do something about the situations around us. So yeah, I stepped into that and I've tried my best to nurture that. And then that last circle, in terms of the larger global piece there, that's something that we've had some inconsistency around that for a number of reasons, what I can get into, but that's just a little snapshot as to
That's
how
good.
we've engaged.
Yeah,
our
we'll
community.
come for all of us. We'll come back to the global piece later, but let's stick with the local for a second. What does that look like for you guys, Sharon?
It's interesting, Rich, that you talked about how COVID threw sort of a wrench in your community outreach, because our church, as y'all know, our church had existed for a year and a half before COVID hit.
Mm.
And so we already were just kind of getting our feet wet in terms of what are the needs, how can we serve our community, and then what the community needed and how we could meet those needs changed dramatically. And a lot of our contacts prior to COVID stopped responding to us, weren't there anymore, whatever it was. And so we've, in the last couple of years, sort of been starting over. Right now, one of our main initiatives is we are very involved in our public school system. One thing that is really weird about this area and super sad is this is one of the most highly educated areas in the country. We're equidistant between Duke, UNC, and NC State, some of the top universities in the country, but the Durham public school system is notoriously bad. And it's so bad that a lot of Christians, once their kids become school age, they move into a different county to move away from it. And so we're also kind of hemorrhaging resources that way. And so we have felt really called to support our local public schools. That's something we've been doing. We are also doing refugee care. We have a pretty sizable refugee population here. And then another thing that we've been getting more traction around lately that is it's so encouraging. It's just a work of God, is around foster care. And we have a lot of families stepping forward to do foster care. But the common link between all of them is that we are trying to support organizations that are already doing a really good job rather than reinventing the wheel and trying to do our own thing. And so that's where we're at right now.
That's so cool. Yeah, I stepped in here at Rock Harbor, and they've had a long history of engaging in the community. In fact, one of the campaigns that they talk about from like 10, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, was something called the Go campaign, and they had everybody sign up for some way of stretching yourself and being present to someone or a setting that's different than you. And some of that was local, moving in actually into a different neighborhood, for a short time, or trips around the world. And what's ongoing and sustainable is like these partners. And what we have found is, instead of us kind of being the author and the finisher, if you will, of these initiatives and projects, we're actually just a partner. And so there are some really wonderful groups that, in the area. In fact, there's Young Life that does Young Lives ministry to teenage parents. And Rock Harbor's been a longtime supporter of them. I was just at their banquet the other day. There's another ministry called Northeast of the Well that helps rescue people, minister to people who are in safe houses after being trafficked or being involved in trafficking, victims of trafficking. And so there's the partnerships has been the key for us, in mobilizing our people. But I think what we've tried to get better at is articulating it as sort of a funnel, where the top layer of the funnel is the easiest, the lowest barrier to entry in terms of engagement, highest number of people, but oftentimes those are the lowest frequency of events. So it's like one time a year, the big serve day, Love Costa Mesa every May or whatever. And then the next layer of the funnel, it's maybe a bit more frequent, but a smaller group of people. And then often the things that require consistency, once a month or even once every 2 weeks, it's a smaller number of people. What about global stuff, guys? Like, when you think about globally, do you do sponsorships? Do you do trips? What does that look like? Sharon, we'll start with you.
We are not to a point where we are sending people on trips. One thing that's sort of a dream of mine is we have a lot of people at our church who are doctors or nurses or who are in the healthcare industry. And so I'd really love to send a medical team at some point, but we are still figuring out what it looks like to partner internationally. We have worked with a couple different organizations, but when you are working with smaller organizations that you aren't kind of internationally known and vetted, it's hard to know, how do we vet these smaller organizations? And so that's something that we have been navigating, because I've heard stories where that vetting did not happen and it was catastrophic because of it. And so that's something that honestly, we as a younger church are still figuring out. What is this going to look like for us? And we haven't really settled on an answer yet.
And if that's encouraging to hear for some people, just to hear, listen, our church is 36 years old, and in many ways we're figuring it out, what it looks like to do this. So next year we're actually having about a 6 to 8 week series on mission and missions. Our context in Queens is interesting, because if you want to reach the world, you just have to go across the street. In our context, 75 nations represented within our neighborhood, 123 languages spoken. And so on some level, the nations are literally next door or across the street. But we have really, our emphasis has not been global in terms of how traditional mission. We've sent a team to Puerto Rico, we've sent teams to the Philippines, but that has not been part of our annual or even every couple of years approach. It's happened here or there. And right now we're just at a place of discerning to what degree do we sense God calling us to do that. And so next year is actually a really big series that we're undertaking, which will have implications for the work that we're doing. But at this stage, most of our work has been hyper local in the ways that we've served others over the past 3 decades.
I appreciate the honesty from both of you guys, because I actually think, and this is just anecdotal, I don't have the Barna data on this, but I do hear a lot of pastors saying that actually the whole philosophy of global missions is changing right now. And I've talked to a lot of missions pastors who are saying this, where in the past it was send to send to send, and the church was sort of like a short-term sending agency. You have the big ministries that do the long-term sending, and then churches do the short-term sending. And I'm not against that, and I think that probably in some measure maybe continues. But we've learned a lot over the last few decades, in particular the when helping hurts stuff, the when our team's a disruption to ministers who are ministering overseas. When is ministry actually done best by locals and people who are indigenous to the area? I think about growing up in Malaysia and all the teams that came from Australia or America or wherever, and I'm like, I don't know how helpful this is, and sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think even for us at Rock Harbor, like it's been interesting because what has morphed over the years is people have started some initiatives overseas and partnered with people in India and people in Uganda. But the beautiful thing is it's all been led by locals. And so essentially the partnership is shaped by what they ask us for. So if they say to us, and they're never going to say we just need your money, but they will say, hey, help us plant a church or help us build another school and then help us train some pastors, so then you take a strategic trip. So I do wonder if some measure of global engagement looks like strategic vision trips. But it leads me, this conversation with Jeanne, and I know we need to wrap it here in a second, but she led her church to kind of flipping even the child sponsorship script, from instead of you going out into the lobby of the church and seeing pictures of children and then choosing to adopt one or sponsor one, they went out to the church lobby to a photo booth and took pictures of themselves and then sent it over to I can't remember which country it was, and then they took a team and went over in the village and watched that community there look at pictures of her congregants and then choose the ones that they wanted, which I thought, and some beautiful stories came out of that. It's called the Chosen is the program that they actually helped pioneer.
That's so fascinating. I think that is really like the subtext of this whole conversation. Like I spent so much time in the Baptist world. And so it was like sends, missions, 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 missions. But I think we're in this moment where we're having to reassess how we were doing missions. And I think that's why all of us have expressed we're kind of in transition right now. And so if anyone else listening feels that way, to know that might actually be a really wonderful thing. So I'm excited to jump into your conversation with Jeanne about this. But before we do, I first want to take a quick minute to name some of our partners who have been generous to make this whole initiative possible. First off, we want to thank World Vision. Produced by Barna Group in partnership with World Vision, the free Resilient Pastor video series includes exclusive interviews with myself, Glenn, Rich, and other renowned thought leaders that help equip you for the ministry challenges you're facing today. You can go to www.worldvision.org/Barna2024. And we want to thank Brotherhood Mutual. Brotherhood Mutual is a leading national provider of ministry-focused insurance and services. It's headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Brotherhood Mutual has a heart for serving the church and keeping ministries thriving. For more information, visit brotherhoodmutual.com. And now to Glenn's conversation with Jeanne.
Well, I'm so glad today to be talking with Jeanne Stevens. Jeanne, you and I got to do 3 of these Resilient Pastor roundtables together in a few different cities.
We're
and
touring
here we are.
buddies.
That's right. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Listen, I know you're not a stranger to most of our listeners, but I would love if you would just share a little bit about your journey into church leadership and including Soul City, the church that you lead now, but just describe some of the mile markers along the journey for you.
Yeah, it has been an amazing story, an amazing unfolding. And like all of God's unfolding stories, I could have never architected this story. I could have never written it myself. It's had lots of twists and turns, but so grateful to be where I am today. If you would have asked me when I started this journey, are you going to be a church planter and are you going to start a church in downtown Chicago? I would have never said that was going to be a part of where God took me. After college, my husband and I found ourselves at Willow Creek Community Church in Barrington, Illinois. And, we were fresh in our 20s, fresh in ministry, given opportunities that probably were ridiculous to experience, but got to see the church expand and this beautiful movement of people finding God and finding a relationship with God that were very unchurched. And so we spent 11 years there. After our time at Willow, we went down to North Point Community Church, got to be under Andy Stanley's leadership for 4 years. And that was such an incredible gift. I learned so much about preaching. I learned so much about culture. I learned so much about the importance of trust and health in a staff team. And then God just interrupted our story and interrupted the plot and invited us into this sacred adventure of starting a church. And so, with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, we moved to downtown Chicago and started a church in our living room and just invited people to start meeting with us. And our mission is to lead people into a transforming relationship with Jesus. We're all about the soul, the city, and the world, thus our name, Soul City Church.
Amazing.
We just felt like we can't experience true transformation in our lives if it doesn't happen at a soul level. And so that's where the name came from. And so it's been a wild adventure the last 13 years of leading this church alongside of my husband, Jarrett. So we're co-lead pastors, and it's just been an incredible adventure.
Wow. It's just so fascinating, and I think probably a lot of people will find some encouragement in different of the moments that you named. I mean, there's good and bad in all these different experiences and environments, but just knowing that the Lord can redeem different parts of the story and kind of put it to use. And talk about, ending up in a place that you would have never drawn up the story or written the story that way. I mean, that's similar
Totally.
for Holly and I. We never thought we'd leave Colorado and end up here in Orange County. And
Right.
now I ended up in a slightly warmer place than you.
You did.
Jeanne.
I would like to talk to the Lord about that. See if my zip code could change eventually.
One of the things I love about what you and Jared are doing at Soul City is just how you have captured your people to look beyond themselves and look beyond the walls of the church. And Barna has had a lot of, done a lot of research in finding out what people who are not Christians, what they're looking for in a church, which is, it's a funny question to ask someone who's not a Christian. What actually do you look for in a church? And the top 3 responses that came back were to provide hands-on help to people in need, to practically assist those in need, kind of the same thing, and then offer counseling and care. Which is, it sort of makes sense. It is what you would expect. How have you, when you guys have, as you led the church, how have you helped your church move beyond their walls and to engage the local community?
Yeah, that has been a part of who we are from day one. In fact, I'll tell a quick story. Before, we have this amazing miracle story of this family giving us a building rent-free for 2 years in downtown Chicago. It was like just a critical movement of God in the very beginning of our story. And so we have this warehouse and we're like, well, we need some chairs. People are going to need to sit down if they're going to come to a service, right? They're probably not going to enjoy standing room only for, every service. And we instantly thought, we're probably not the only organization in the city that needs something. And so we did this little fundraiser at the very beginning. I mean, literally before we ever had services. And we said, let's have everyone buy a seat for us for Soul City Church. And let's put a seat at one of our partners, Breakthrough Urban Ministries, in their new family center. So we had this little campaign called, buy a seat, give a seat. And I tell that quick story, Glenn, because having a mindset that you do not exist unto yourself from the very beginning was really critical to who we are as a church. If the church just exists for itself and the perpetuation of it continuing to exist for itself, and there is no movement in your community, in your city, or around the world where people would rise up and say, gosh, what happened? That church left and our city has been affected because of it. We wanted to be known with a good name in our community, in our city, and around the world. And so that has really directed our decisions from day one. We've had partnerships with local CPS, Chicago Public Schools, from day one. A couple years into our church, one of the schools that we're partnered with was on the list to be shut down in Chicago. And the people of Soul City rallied, went to all of the different town hall meetings, and we kept Brown Elementary School open. Every
Wow.
Christmas, we hold a Christmas
Wow.
store, and it's this beautiful, dignified experience where families from the CPS local schools right around our area, they come and shop with greatly reduced prices so they can shop in dignity for their children and provide a beautiful Christmas experience. So it's been within our community, and then we started really realizing that, to those statistics, it's not just how do we support the needs of our community, but how do we also walk alongside of people when they're struggling and be in relationship, because it's one thing to bring support and aid, it's another thing to build dignified relationship. And so we've created a house of hope that really walks alongside of people when the bottom drops out in your life. And who hasn't had the bottom drop out, right? I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah,
who hasn't
absolutely. Right.
had a moment where you lost a job or you found yourself in a really challenging relationship with a loved one and you needed support emotionally, spiritually, relationally? Maybe you just needed some help with some, rent for a month to kind of move things along. And so we've created this center called the House of Hope. It's just become this beautiful place where people in our community can advocate for others inside of our community. I mean, things like we've got a bunch of attorneys in our church, and they come on Saturday mornings and provide pro bono counsel to people that maybe wouldn't be able to hire a lawyer to work through an insurance situation, so it's things like that that I think has actually attracted those outside of the church to what God is doing in Soul City Church, because it is us being true to what we said we want to be about. We want to be about the soul of the city and the world.
Jeannie, I'm sitting here listening and I'm like inspired, I'm convicted. I mean, really. And my brain is spinning like, gosh, what are some of the ways we can do things like this at Rock Harbor? And just to name for, the people listening, like just to name some of the things you mentioned. I mean, there's like financial giving, in the chairs and all that. But then there was sort of activism or service, like advocacy work, going
Yeah.
to the school. And then there was kind of providing resources, and then there's services, like
Yep.
those attorneys, and all done in a way that is relational and dignifying. And so
That's right.
there's not this sort of patronage,
Yes.
patronizing kind of
Yes.
connection, which is so beautiful. And just to commend you guys for that, man, that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. It's, I will say, I often feel like I am the greatest recipient of our mission at our church because it works on my life. Our mission is to lead people into a transforming relationship with Jesus. And so I'm the one that feels most transformed by all of that. I don't take the credit for that. I have been taught, transformed, challenged, even parts of me where I realized, gosh, there have been some broken narrative in my story along the years around what it looks like to come alongside of someone, some heroism, some saviorism, and that has really been some beautiful work that God has transformed inside of me as I've just walked alongside the amazing people of Soul City Church. And so it really is, when I say it is not me, these are some incredible heroes inside of our church that I just admire, look up to. They're teaching me as we continue to move forward.
One of the fears sometimes we have, maybe as pastors, is the more we push the attention or the momentum of the focus outward. Hey, hang on. What about the quote unquote the main thing, or
Right.
the center of this thing? But it's interesting. Even in 2022, Barna did the Spiritually Open study, and they asked Christian adults why they participate in their worship community. And I actually found like about a quarter of them, 23%, said to be involved in my community. Like I'm part
Yeah.
of this church so that I can be involved in my community. And 20% said something similar, to care for my community. So I'm just curious, like you don't give to get back, right? But God is always going to be the most extravagant person in the room. We can never outgive God. as
That's
you've
right.
pushed the focus of the church outward, how have you seen it actually return in transformation or discipleship in people?
Yeah, I think it is always a beautiful trust dance, right? As pastors, because we know what is needed and necessary for the bottom line, if you will, to keep things running, right? To keep things operating. And when Holy Spirit drops something into maybe the heart of a person in your community that says, well, what about this? Or how can we serve here? Where are we a part of what God is doing in our community around this? And you're like, oh gosh, one more thing to do outside of our walls when there's so much to do inside of our walls. This happened just this last fall. Chicago is a safe city, and we've had many refugees, asylum seekers come into our city. And a handful of people in our church said, hey, we've got a whole lot of new neighbors. What are we doing? And the truth is, we weren't doing anything. And it caused us as a leadership team to go, okay, this is our people rising up saying, we want to do something. We want to do it in partnership with the church. And so they were calling us to our mission. And I love that. And it's challenging, and and you can't do everything.
Sure,
So,
sure.
there are times where you have to really discern and listen, but this was one of those things where it felt like, I think we need to pay attention here. And so handful of people started cooking each week and making hot meals and partnering, and we just did a huge clothing drive, and that was all directed by people inside of the congregation, Glenn.
That's amazing.
It wasn't through like a staff member that
Right.
is our local and global initiative person,
Right.
and so yeah.
And every one of those staff, global and local engagement, would tell you their dream it would be for the church or for the congregants themselves to kind of, but
Absolutely.
it's very clear that, even from day one, you've created the clarity of vision about who we are as a church, clarity of identity, and you've set the culture to now it makes it easy. It makes it natural, second nature, if you will,
Yes.
as for people to say, yes, so let's do this. And you've also done this on a global scale. I know you talk about this with World Vision all the time, and I've heard you share this story a few times at our roundtables, and I was just so struck by it every time. But tell the story of how you guys helped pioneer something brand new with World Vision, and how many years into the life of your church did this occur? And yeah, tell a bit of that story.
Yeah, I love telling this story. Some friends of ours, we started partnering with World Vision from the very beginning. And so we were a part of making sure that our people had a global experience, not just inside of our walls and right outside in the city and the community, but we wanted them to have a global picture of what God was doing around the world. And so we partnered with World Vision. And so we've run marathons and raised resources for money or for water. I mean, and so we've had this beautiful relationship. But in 2019, we were probably, about 8 or 9 years into the life of our church, and World Vision and myself, I had a few friends there, and we started talking about how important it is for this generation to really be a part of global initiatives, but done in a dignified way. And we started looking at child sponsorship, which has been a method used by not just World Vision, many NGOs and nonprofits, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But we started looking at it and saying, is there a way that we could put more dignity inside of this idea of child sponsorship? And so we came up with this idea of, well, what if we could have children choose instead of people in the congregation choose their sponsored child? We're like, oh, there's so many complicated things. There's no way that that's going to happen. There's no way we can make that work. And we're like, well, let's just try it. In fact, I remember my friends at World Vision saying, and Edgar, the CEO of World Vision, is a dear friend of mine. And they were like, Edgar's going to give us one shot at this. And so let's see if it works. And so I stood up on a Sunday at Soul City. This had never been done before. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're inviting you to be chosen by a child. We're going to ask you to go out into the lobby today to get your picture taken I'm going to jump on a plane and I'm going to fly to Kenya tonight, and I'm going to take your picture with me. And then on Tuesday, I'm going to hang your picture up in this village in Mawala where there's about 1,000 kids that aren't sponsored. And they're going to see your face and they're going to decide who they want to sponsor them. And I mean, I'm saying this out loud thinking this is never going to work. No one is going to go out into the lobby and get their picture taken. Like, oh, this is going to flop. And Glenn, that day, 600 people walked out to the lobby, got their pictures taken. I got on a plane and went to Mawala, Kenya. And that Tuesday, I will tell you, it was like being in a liminal space at that choosing party. Like I literally felt like I was in a collision of heaven and earth. These children walking up to pictures of my people, of our congregation, choosing them. I mean, I sobbed for 5 days straight. I was dehydrated. I was crying so much. I just had never had an experience like that. And then I flew back, and the following Sunday, we put all these pictures up in our, lobby where people would go and see the child that chose them. And then that day, another 250 said, no, I want in. I want a child to choose me. And so it opened up this movement, which is now, we started in 2019. I believe over 500 churches have done a chosen around the world. I think we're close to 100,000 children have been chosen.
Wow.
In the last 3 years. And there was a global pandemic in there as well. And so it has just been this movement of God that was birthed out of Soul City Church that I just could have never written myself. And it has been an absolutely incredible experience. And I love that our people, just this last October, I got to take a couple of our people to Kenya to meet the child that chose them. I mean, talk about an unreal experience when you're traveling with some people from your congregation to meet a child that picked them. We all know that God so loved that he gave his son, that idea. We have been chosen. And I feel like my people at Soul City, are the people of this church, having a child choose them, it was like they had a taste of what it feels like to be chosen by God. So it just reversed the whole thing. It was so beautiful, is so beautiful. Feel so honored to have been a part of that story.
We'll get back to my conversation with Jeanne in just a moment, but listen, this is the perfect time to acknowledge one of our incredible partners in this Resilient Pastor initiative, and that's World Vision. You just heard Jeanne talking about them, but World Vision does more than child sponsorships. They actually help produce the Resilient Pastor video series in partnership with the Barna Group, and it brings together renowned thought leaders and seasoned pastors who are sharing their insights, experiences, and practical wisdom to help pastors and church leaders navigate the challenges they face and build resilience in their calling. So it's hosted by Krish Kandaya. The Resilient Pastor video series features exclusive interviews with Carrie Newhoff and Daniel Mavengi, along with special presentations by myself, by Rich Philotis, and Sharon Hadi Miller. So you can visit worldvision.org/Barna2024 to get access to these today. And we want to thank Brotherhood Mutual. Brotherhood Mutual is a leading national provider of ministry-focused insurance and services. They're headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but Brotherhood Mutual has a heart for serving the church all around the country, keeping ministries thriving everywhere. So for more information, visit brotherhoodmutual.com. And now back to my conversation. There's these repeated themes that you've touched on a few times now of dignity, of mutuality, which is so much the way of Jesus. And it kind of leads, I want to pivot here just a little bit. It kind of leads me to ask you, like, to offer that kind of dignity and mutuality, to offer something that is in the way of Jesus requires a kind of rootedness in your own sort of life and presence. And I mean, the image that I have is like a giant tree, an oak tree or something, a sequoia, whatever, where it offers this amazing shade, but it's got, deep roots and Your latest project, What's Here Now, is all about the ability to be present to the Lord and to one another. And sometimes for us as church leaders, and I'm guilty of this, I'm just moving so quickly. I've got a thousand things spinning at the same time that we miss the opportunity to actually offer either the opportunity to be creative and think outside the
Yeah.
box, or just the opportunity to give someone the dignity of our own presence with them. How has this been kind of a learning thing for you, of connecting the sense of presence with even the sense of mission?
Yeah. I love the imagery that you used of a tree, and it instantly caused me to think of Psalm 1, that we are these trees planted by streams of living water. And the metaphor that you used of the roots, right? That they would be so deep and so strong, and they would receive the nutrients of the living water of God. And I think the only way that we can experience that is if we continue to learn how to dwell in the present with God, and do the work of transformation ourselves. And I just shared all those beautiful stories, and God has most definitely been at work at Soul City Church. But I would also say that some of the deepest work has been the work God has done in and on me as a leader. And a lot of that activity in the life of Soul City caused me to get to a point where I was doing the work of God, and the work of God was being almost diminished inside of me. And so I was functioning out of doing instead of that being. I was functioning out of all of the efforting that goes into ministry, and not the being planted by the streams of living water. And what I began to realize is that we don't experience the peace of God if we don't learn how to dwell in the present with God. And what I was offering to others was not a present leader. I was offering a drained, dry, brittle, going back to the tree, there were not a lot of leaves. There was not a lot of fruit. And while there was lots of activity, to have a dry and drained leader, eventually that's going to dry up the work of what God is doing in and through that church. And so for me, I started realizing that I needed to really begin to practice living and leading from presence. Because I was really good at rehashing the past, really good at going back and trying to change things. That clue, you can't change the past, right? But I was trying to do that.
Right.
And I was really good at rehearsing the future, and trying to control things. And I realized, okay, I'm not living there. The place where I am living is in the here and the now. And the greatest gift that I can offer back to God and to the people he's asked me to shepherd is a present person, a person that is in the here and the now, that is available to what Holy Spirit is doing in this now moment. And so, yeah, it has been a beautiful work of God reorienting a lot of my patterns, a lot of my disciplines, a lot of what I say yes to. I have a lot of work still to do, but I was just saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was not going to be able to go the long haul if I didn't start to take care of my soul, of who God created me to be. And so, yeah, the latest book that I just wrote, What's Here Now, really is a invitation to people to live in the present moment. And it's an invitation to me to live there too.
And to me, and I've heard you talk about this, and I know it's in the book as well, about just even helping people break it down. Like, where are your thoughts going?
Yeah.
You talk about rehearsing the
Yeah.
past, or
Yeah.
rehashing the past and rehearsing
Mhm.
the future. And then where are your emotions? What are you
Yeah.
feeling, to be able to
Mhm.
bring that to the Lord, and then even our bodies.
Yeah.
And I think those are just really, really helpful ways of saying, okay, what does that mean to be present,
Yep.
dwell in the present with God? Like, what does that
Yep.
mean? And so if you're listening to this and you're considering, gosh, I need that. I want to learn more about this. Pick up Jeannie's book and let it be a meditation, even for this new year, about how you can enter into this new year with more presence to the Lord and to one another. Jeannie, as we wrap up this time, we love to kind of actually create a moment of space in each of our episodes where we allow people to pause and pray and bring their hearts to the Lord. So I wonder if you would just pray over our listeners right here as we conclude this time.
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, Glenn. I just invite anyone that is listening right now to just take a deep breath, just to inhale, to exhale, and to actually just use that question as a gift right now, to ask what's here now. What are you feeling in your heart? What emotions are present? What are you thinking in your mind? What continues to cross the ticker tape of your mind? And then what are you sensing in your body? And to bring all of those things to the Lord, to invite God to be with you in the here and the now, because if it's not happening now, it's actually not happening. And to know that God is our ever-present help, ever-present, means that God, while he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, he is in this now moment with you. He's with you in those feelings, whatever they are. He's with you in those thoughts. He's with you in what you're carrying in your body. And God, we pause in this moment and we speak back to you that we long to be people that can be still and know that you are God. Know that you are good. Know that you are faithful. And know that you are present. We trust you in this now moment. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
You're so welcome. Thanks, Glenn.
I just love these conversations with Jeannie Stevens. I hope you enjoyed that. Honestly, every time I'm not only inspired, but I'm also challenged. So we're so grateful to be able to bring you conversations like this one. And special thanks once again to our partners. First of all, to World Vision. They do more than engagement and community building and child sponsorship. They're also invested in the local church. And so World Vision helped partner with Barna Group to create the Resilient Pastor video series. And it includes exclusive interviews with renowned thought leaders, Sharon Miller, Rich Velotis, many others, including myself, that help equip you for the ministry challenges you're facing today. So be sure to go to worldvision.org/Barna2024 to get it. I also want to thank Brotherhood Mutual. Brotherhood Mutual is a leading national provider of ministry-focused insurance and services, headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Brotherhood Mutual has a heart for serving the church and keeping ministries thriving. For more information, visit brotherhoodmutual.com. We're so grateful that you take time to listen to this podcast, and we certainly hope that it's been an encouragement to you. And if it has, would you leave us a rating or a review? Give us some feedback. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow so you don't miss an episode. And please be sure to share it with others, people who love the church, who love church leaders, who are church leaders. It'd be great to encourage as many people as possible. Friends, we're praying for you. May the Lord bless you and keep you today.